The moment you react emotionally, you lose more than just control of the situation. You lose control of yourself. And the person in front of you? They don't need to overpower you anymore. They just need to trigger you. Because once your reaction becomes predictable, you become easy to control.
Welcome to True Stoic Journal, the path to inner control.
Brain the power of not reacting, Stoic mindset. There is a pattern most people never notice. It happens so fast that it feels natural. Someone says something. Maybe it's disrespectful. Maybe it's dismissive. Maybe it just hits something personal. And instantly, your body responds. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts speed up. Your mind starts preparing a response before they even finish speaking. You want to correct them. Explain yourself. Prove something. It feels justified. But what feels natural isn't always powerful. Because in that exact moment, something important happens. You stop choosing your response and start releasing it. That difference is everything. When your response is automatic, it is no longer controlled. And when it's not controlled, it's predictable. And anything predictable can be influenced. This is how people give away power without realizing it. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But quietly. Through repeated reactions. The Stoics understood this better than most. They didn't try to remove emotion. They understood something deeper. Emotion is unavoidable. But reaction is optional. And between emotion and reaction, there is a space. Small, almost invisible. But inside that space is control. Most people never access that space. Because emotion feels urgent. It tells you to act immediately. To respond now. To fix it before it's too late. But urgency is not clarity. It's pressure. And pressure leads to reaction, not control. That's why most reactions are not thoughtful. They are fast. Driven by ego. Driven by discomfort. Driven by the need to regain control. But reacting doesn't restore control. It gives it away. Because when someone can predict how you'll react, they don't need to fight you. They just need to trigger you. And that's where the real shift begins. Not in controlling them, but in controlling yourself. When you start asking a different question, not, what did they do? But, what is happening inside me right now? That question changes everything. Because it brings your focus back to the only thing you truly control. Your thoughts. Your interpretation. Your response. Not their behavior. Not their intention. Just you. And that doesn't limit you. It grounds you. Because when you stop trying to control everything outside, you finally gain control within. That's where stability begins. Not in winning arguments. Not in proving your point. But in mastering your reaction. So what happens when you pause? Not a forced pause. Not the kind where you're holding everything in while your mind is still racing. But a real pause. The kind where you step back internally, and choose not to act immediately. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Because you're interrupting a pattern your mind has followed for years. The urge is still there. The thoughts are still forming. The emotions are still present. But you don't act on them. And slowly, something changes. The intensity starts to fade. Not because the situation changed, but because your relationship to it did. That's the key most people miss. You don't need the situation to change to regain control. You need your response to change. Because when you stop reacting instantly, you stop feeding the pattern. And when the pattern breaks, the entire dynamic shifts. Most interactions rely on predictability. One person speaks. The other reacts. Back and forth. But when you step out of that cycle, something unusual happens. Silence. Not empty silence. Intentional silence. And that kind of silence carries weight. Because it breaks expectation. People are used to reactions. Arguments. Explanations. Emotional responses. So when those don't appear, it creates uncertainty. And uncertainty forces reflection. That's why silence is so misunderstood. People think it means weakness. That if you don't react, you don't care. But in reality, it takes far more strength to remain composed than to react emotionally. Reaction is instinctive. It requires no effort. But restraint? Restraint requires awareness. It requires discipline. It requires control. And that is real power. Over time, something begins to shift inside you. You stop feeling the need to respond to everything. You stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. You stop chasing validation from people who misunderstand you. Not because you don't care, but because you've realized something important. Your peace is not something to negotiate. It's something to protect. And protecting it starts with discipline. Not harsh discipline. But internal discipline. The kind that creates space between what you feel and what you do. Because in that space, you are no longer reacting. You are choosing. And choice is where power exists. As this becomes your habit, you start changing in ways that are subtle, but powerful. You become harder to provoke. Harder to read. Harder to control. Not because you're hiding, but because you're no longer predictable in the ways that weaken you. You stop feeding patterns that once controlled you. You stop reacting out of habit. You start moving with intention. And slowly, your mind becomes quieter. You stop replaying conversations. You stop analyzing every situation. You stop needing closure from people who were never capable of giving it. Instead, you create your own closure. By choosing where your attention goes. Because the truth is simple, what keeps most people stuck is not what happened. It's what they keep doing with it afterward. The thinking. The replaying. The emotional attachment. That's where energy is lost. And wherever your energy goes, your life follows. When you redirect that energy, everything begins to change. Not all at once. But gradually. You begin to feel distance. Not emotional coldness, but stability. You can observe without being consumed. You can feel without being controlled. And that's real freedom. Not freedom from situations, but freedom within them. You no longer need people to understand you to feel at peace. You no longer need to prove your worth. You no longer need to react to feel in control. Because you already are. And eventually, you realize something that changes everything. The real power was never in reacting. It was in choosing not to. Not because you don't feel, but because you've learned not to be ruled by what you feel. And when you reach that point, you don't just respond differently. You become different. Calmer. Clearer. Stronger in a way that doesn't need to be shown. Because your control is no longer external. It's internal. And once that happens, you are no longer easy to disturb. No longer easy to influence. No longer easy to control. And that is real power. If this changed the way you see your reactions, subscribe to the channel. Because here, we don't just talk about discipline, we build it.